Welcome back to Saturday State of Mind. I'm Jess Panico, joined as always by Mike Panico. And today we're going to continue our conversation in our series of talking about planning for retirement within the 5 worlds. The world that we're discussing in this episode is that of inflation. Mike, ready to talk about some philosophy when it comes to planning for inflation in retirement?
That's intimidating. We have the philosophic side of inflation.
It's intimidating, Mike. I've heard you talk for an hour straight without taking a breath. So I don't know how intimidating it is for you. You love it. You love talking about inflation.
I'm sure it was the time of your life. Yeah. I think when people think of retirement planning, they often distill it down to, first and foremost, it's an exercise in investing.
Sure.
I often try to, trip people up a little bit, mostly for cheap entertainment, I guess. Why do we even invest our money? Right?
For the thrill of it.
Jess, I know you've got an account where you do a little play money stuff. You buy this stock or that stock. You buy some funds that you like. You check in on it. You see how you're doing, right?
I do it just to beat you.
Yeah.
Because I'm competitive.
Well, there's times where that account's up and there's times where it's down, right? It's a roller coaster of emotions, right? Why do we even subject ourselves to that exercise?
Well, because if you put $1 under the mattress, sadly, that dollar isn't going to keep up with the pace of inflation in the future.
So the cost of living increases over time. Mm-hmm. I think it would be fair to say, well, I invest so that my money grows. Sure, who doesn't want to become wealthier? But is becoming wealthier either a luxury or a necessity? Again, to get philosophic here for a second, to a degree, it's a necessity. Because if you do have a bunch of money saved for your future and you just keep it in a coffee can, right? How many times do you hear your grandfather, somebody like that would say, in my time, a can of Coke was a nickel, mm-hmm. right? Well,
I was saying that yesterday when I got gas in my car.
Right. And now everybody's drinking these probiotic sodas that are $2 to $3 a can, right?
They're so tasty.
So why is soda more expensive? Why is everything more expensive? Because life gets more expensive. That's inflation. I know there's some people out there that want me to rail about the Federal Reserve or something like that. We're not doing that in this space. I don't affect that stuff, but we do help people strategize for this. Things will get more expensive over time. So the coffee can, under the mattress, even some of the evolutionary steps beyond that, well, just putting it in a checking account, money market, right? The stuff that's safe, but we're still getting a modest rate of return. Once we leave that department, we're looking at bonds, we're looking at stocks, we're looking at crypto, maybe real estate. We subject ourselves to all of this research, all of this deployment, all this risk, all the emotional ups and downs that come along with it, because we have to make sure that our dollars can keep up with the cost of living.
Sure. But I think, one thing about Arcadia is that we obviously invest our folks' money here, but we say that it's not about getting the highest rate of return or the most volatile stock, right? It's about taking the least amount of risk possible in retirement while protecting you to keep up with the rate of inflation.
Okay. So what amount of risk should we all be taking? It's a question we get asked all the time.
The right amount.
Okay. So how do we measure that?
With a yardstick.
Okay. Do you have that yardstick?
I have a tape measure on my desk.
Okay. So it is challenging, right? What is the right amount of risk? What should you be doing with your money? And I think it helps to remark a little bit about the nature of the problem. If someone were to say, hey, what is inflation? Measure it for me. Jess, you have that yardstick. Stuff is getting more expensive, but at what rate? If I'm planning for the next 20 or 30 years, what rate of inflation should I bake into my assumption set?
Sure. Well, you know what it really gets my goat to, Mike, is that there are advisors out there that will give you very blanket statements that will say 50-50 allocation, stocks, bonds, you're good to go. And I think understanding how much risk you need to take to keep up with inflation is an individual assessment, and beware of anybody that gives advice in blanket capacity.
Okay. I think there's also disparity too in terms of what inflation even is.
Sure.
So the blanket advice
dollar doesn't go as far.
Is usually 2 to 3%.
Sure. Yeah.
It also depends on what you're measuring and also what time period you're looking at.
Because people will look at maybe cost of living adjustments, so every year, they come out saying, hey, what type of increase is Social Security going to get? And that's based off of COLA they talk about too, and saying, hey, this year, this was Social Security got 3% in bump. So we think maybe inflation's 3%. But then there's a consumer price index as well. There's all these type of indices for people to like estimate like what they think inflation is. And then how much risk do you need to take to keep up with it?
Yeah. So when they measure inflation, there's a basket of goods that they look at. And this is a hyper simplistic way of describing it. But they look at how much has a gallon of gasoline gone up in price, a gallon of milk, a pound of beef, so things that people commonly spend money on in the American economy. And they look at the price of that basket from one year to the next. And the difference in the pricing would be hey, prices have gone up 3%. But first of all, what one person, like a 30-year-old, spends in a basket of goods day to day, month to month, year to year, might be very different than what a 70-year-old spends on, right? There's one major thing that's different in that basket from one to the other, right? What do you think older folks spend more money on as compared to younger folks? Healthcare, right?
Sure.
And so if somebody told you healthcare has gone up by 2 to 3% a year over the last 10 odd years, how would you accept that comment? Does that ring to be truthful to you?
Well, it's hard for me to accept because I don't like it. But yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably gone up even more than that. Every year I get a bill from Harvard Pilgrim and I'm like, how much am I paying now to go a physical once a year?
Yeah, I don't even consume a lot of healthcare.
Right.
Like our household might have just a handful of prescriptions, a handful of doctor's visits. I mean, actually probably a couple of emergency room trips, with the kids and stuff. But the one thing that we do see absolutely are the premiums,
Sure.
right? They are not going up 2 to 3% a year. I feel like they're going up 10, 20%
Right.
every single year, right?
Be nice if everybody's paycheck also went up.
There's no sign that that's stopping, right? So when we're helping people plan for retirement, it's not just that you're planning for your own, you're planning for everybody else's around you, because even if you're healthy, right? When we throw money into a common pot vis-a-vis Medicare and the insurance programs that we have, your cost is going up, whether or not you're exercising and keeping care of yourself, or you're just letting yourself go. Like if that your neighbor is constantly, listen, I don't want to make it seem like this is just a difference between people who are exercising and people who aren't, right? Like a lot of this is the luck of the draw, at least when it comes to medical type stuff. No one knows if you're going to contract dementia or cancer, right? There might be clues, but there's no sure things with this stuff. It's just to say this. Life is getting more expensive. It's exploded since COVID, right? And then I'm going to connect a couple of dots so it doesn't seem like we're meandering all over the place too much here. It's just to say this, right? We've almost made it a public policy to not have recessions anymore. Right? Everybody remembers 2008, but it's getting weird. Just 2008 was 16 years ago. Right? So it's well, how come we haven't had a big recession or market crash since? We've had some blips on the radar.
Quantitative easing?
Well, we've just made it almost public policy that whenever the stock market's down, right? I mean, Trump talks about this stuff. Biden talked about it before him. Every time the market goes down, they're yelling at the Federal Reserve, do something. We need to do something. It's public policy now to kind of keep things aloft. And all of the tools that they have at their disposal, whether it be quantitative easing, adjusting interest rates, right? All of those things tend to be very stimulative with inflation.
Sure.
I remember with the planning team here at Arcadia, we were just talking about this. Even working with the millionaire next door, about 5-6 years ago, certainly pre-COVID, when we asked the average person, what do you need per month to live happily ever after? I'm talking about a standard person, maybe their mortgage is paid off, perhaps they're doing a couple trips, they live in New England, that sort of deal. I think we used to almost always hear $5,000, $6,000, or $7,000 a month.
Sure.
It's only 5 or 6 years later, all we hear about is $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a month.
10 seems to be a very true number.
It's well, have people gotten more expensive tastes? I know things have gotten more expensive. I was joking with you just a couple of summers ago, how long is it going to take for a pound of lobster to cost over $20? How long is it going to take for certain restaurants to start charging you $20 for a beer? Just,
oh gosh,
you know,
prices.
When we were first dating, there were still dollar draft nights. Right?
Yeah.
Remember the good old days in Boston? And now there's places where you look at the beer menu and it's $16 for an IPA. And it
was also $1 for a teriyaki stick at the Hong Kong if you wanted to go.
So here's the dot I want to connect. I don't want to just sit here and idly complain about it. I don't think this is going to slow down anytime soon. I think that because we made it public policy to avoid recessions, inflation's kind of baked into the pie. And so what if the 2 to 3% is too modest? What if your expenses are going up 5, 6, 7, 8% a year? What if having your money just sit in money market Never mind the coffee can. But even with certain like stock and bond portfolios, what if the amount of risk that you're taking, the returns that you're aiming for, the investment portfolio that you have is being, it's almost built on antiquated advice. For so long, we would tell people, you're getting older, you can't take that much risk anymore. Well, what if the risk is not competing adequately enough with inflation?
Right. The risk is not taking enough risk to compete with inflation.
Yeah. And so this is not me saying you have to go buy a bunch of Bitcoin and start taking the most risk possible. I think sometimes we jump to the wrong conclusions here. It's just that the way that people have prepared for retirement, the nature of inflation, the nature of market risk, I think has changed quite a bit. And so all we're saying to people is, perhaps we need to put on a second pair of glasses, take a second look at what it is that we're doing. Just accept that inflation might not be going anywhere, but you can plan for it, right? Because at the same time that inflation's gone up so much, you want to know what else has gone up a lot? Everything that you invest in.
Sure.
So part of the reason that we work with the millionaire next door is because there's a lot more millionaires now. Right. Somebody whose house was worth $400,000 in 2018, their house is worth $1 million now.
I mean, that's what we say when we say we work with a millionaire next door. If you own a home, you probably are worth $1 million.
And it's not it's people's 401ks.
Right.
Whatever your 401k was worth in 2019, it's probably double or triple. The market has been good. Inflation doesn't just make a dozen eggs or like the restaurant bill cost more. It also makes the things that you own more valuable.
True.
So you can connect these things in a plan. I don't like inflation. Nobody does. But do you like the fact that your investments are appreciating? The real estate that you own is appreciating. What if we could connect these dots so that instead of inflation feeling like some big prohibiting factor, you could say, well, okay, well, at least if I can offset it with what it is that I'm doing with an appropriate amount of risk. You don't want to take risk with all of your portfolios. You still need money put aside for rainy days, emergencies, medical stuff, right? But if we can make sure confidently, because we can stress test this, Jess, right? That you've got the proper amount of assets working hard enough. So even if your budget keeps ballooning, you can keep pace with it. You can keep fearlessly spending so you can live every day like it's Saturday. Then you might not have the problem that you think that you have.
I think it's like anything, you got to know thy enemy. And if we know what inflation is, then we know how to properly plan around it. If you're not having these conversations, we encourage you to do so with your financial professional. This is helpful. Like and subscribe for more. And watch our next video in the series on the 5 worlds of retirement planning, which is healthcare. We'll see you next time.